leaders and organizations think that diverse teams equals diversity. But diversity without inclusion is tokenism. The thing that I see most misguided is the idea that the CEO runs the company. It's not just about running a company, it's about providing.
In this episode, I sit down with Kelly McDonald to uncover a leadership blind spot that many of us face, why diversity alone isn't enough. Together, we explore how to move beyond check-the-box thinking and unlock the real power of inclusion. So what if the key to better decisions and stronger teams lies in the conversations we are now having? Eye-opening discussion on reshaping how we lead and connect.
A lot of CEOs do a great job of setting goals, but how do you make that goal come alive for every single person in the organization?
So how can really leaders and teams really become much more mindful of this perception to create such stronger relationships?
The real opportunity is in working with your best customers, extracting from them what it is they would change about you if they could. And the way to do that is not to say,
Hi everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of the World Class Leaders. So today I'm very excited, as always, to have another guest. And today's guest is a person I'm really looking forward to talk to, and is Kelly McDonald. And Kelly is an acclaimed speaker who specializes in consumer trends and changing demographics. And she's the president of McDonald Marketing and has authored 4 best-selling books on the customer experience, leadership, and marketing, all from the standpoint of working with people not like you. And her book, How to Work With and Lead People Not Like You, has been on 2 bestseller lists. So very excited with this conversation. Welcome, Kelly.
well, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Would you like to tell us where you are today?
Yes, as you can probably see, I'm in a hotel room in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I am here in Lincoln. I live in Denver, Colorado, but I'm here in Lincoln to do a speaking engagement tonight and also tomorrow morning for an organization called Bryan Health, which is like the largest healthcare service in the state of Nebraska.
Great, fantastic. And again, good luck with that. Look, Kelly, we have a number of topics to discuss today, and primarily related to the element of diversity inclusion, which is a topic is important to you, is a part of your experience. It is also a topic that's important for the audience, primarily the CEOs. They're really always interested to understand how can create that conditions for making that happen. But let me start with a little bit more broad question about what has been your experience with the CEOs. I mean, you definitely deal with CEOs in and out, depending on where they are in the journey when they're working with you, but also from your personal, experience. So what do you see right now, for in terms of things that are either misunderstood or overlooked, when it comes to the role of a CEO? What do you think is relevant for people to know about being a CEO in 2024?
Excellent question. I think the thing that I see that is most misguided, either by the perception of a CEO from someone who's not a CEO, or the CEOs themselves, is the idea that the CEO runs the company. And of course they do. Of course they do. That's a given. But it's not just about running a company. It's about providing the strategic oversight that is specifically, tactically, about setting goals and igniting the vision for the entire organization. So a lot of CEOs do a great job of setting goals. We want to grow by 20% in the next 5 years, something like that, something concrete. But how do you make that goal come alive for every single person in the organization so that they can understand it, they can picture it, and then they can understand what their role is tactically in doing the small things day to day or the large things day to day that are the steps toward that goal. And I feel like sometimes CEOs are really good at, okay, here's the vision, here's the goal that we want to go to, but sometimes they don't do a good job of igniting the vision. And when people feel like they're part of that vision and that they have a direct role in impacting the success of the organization, they perform better. That's been proven. So the best advice I would have for a CEO is to make sure that you are crystallizing for every person in the organization what success looks like and what their role in that is.
Love it. And I think, just building on what you said, I mean, we sometimes take for granted a level of clarity is present in organizations, which most of the time is not. So being able to define what the goals are and what the direction of travel, and then clearly communicate to the entire, workforce is not that either. No, I wouldn't say necessarily easy, but that's definitely not something that is so common, because it's probably often missing in the ability of a CEO to engage, an entire workforce. So that's is a great way to start.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
Can I add one more thing on you? People who have executive skills are often more skilled at understanding big picture. And oftentimes people who have very tactical jobs, like being, let's say, a customer service representative, where your job is to answer the phone and solve a problem, right? So maybe it's not so much the big picture. Maybe it's like, what does that mean for me in my role? And working with the executives that are under the CEO to department by department, break down into the simple steps and also in order. Like, first we need to do this, then we need to do this, then we need to do this, so that people can grasp that vision for themselves and their roles in bite-sized pieces. Because just to say something like, we want to grow 20% in the next 5 years, it's too abstract for a lot of workers.
Yes.
They're like all on board going, okay, great. What am I supposed to do? And the best CEOs work with their leadership team to break it down into, that means that in this department, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And then those steps will help us get there.
Yeah, totally. It makes totally sense. And definitely with you on that. That's a good start. And I think it's a good, the good segue about what we just discussed, because we are starting to talk about the workforce and what does it mean, be actually in the workforce today, given uncertainty, but also given what we said in terms of clarity or lack of clarity in organization, what we need to do next. But one of the key topics in the workforce, and that is really across the globe, is how can we make sure, that we have organizations that have the right level of diversity and people feeling included, in the entire conversation we just discussed about. So I'm interested, given all your experience working with so many organizations around the theme of diversity and inclusion, what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions that leaders actually have about building a very inclusive workplace, and how can they shift their mindset? Big question.
That one's easy.
I'm aware of that.
That one's easy, unfortunately. A lot of leaders and organizations think that diverse teams equals diversity. And therefore, if they hire different kinds of people, whether they are from different countries, different cultures, different races, ethnicities, gender, age, whatever it might be, that, okay, done, right? Check that off the list. Okay, now we're diverse. But diversity without inclusion is tokenism. It needs to take into consideration inclusion, because you can have people in an organization who are different from one another, but if they're not working together inclusively, and they don't feel like they have a voice, and they don't feel that their perspective is being taken into consideration, or frankly, it's just not, then that's just diversity. And you're not harnessing the benefit of diversity, which is diverse perspectives, and that only comes from inclusion. So the best CEOs are the ones who make sure that not only is their teams diverse, but that they actually work with them and talk with them and say, does anybody have any business or life experience that would actually help us see this situation differently, or help us navigate into the future with greater and broader perspective? That's where the magic is. It's not in the color of your skin. It's not in how old you are. It's not in your gender. The magic of diversity is the perspective that different people bring. Because if I'm working with with a team of people, and somebody says, well, what about this? I have this thought on this. I might never have thought of that, because I don't have that same perspective. I don't have the same background. I'm not looking at it through the same lens. So again, diversity without inclusion is just tokenism. And if you really want to harness the power of diversity, it has to be through ongoing conversations and extracting the perspective that different people bring, literally putting them at the table and saying, what do we need to know? What do we need to know that we don't know? Or what advice or perspective can you offer that will help us broaden the lens?
And to me, that is, it's perfect. That's really wonderfully said, because I do believe that, as you said, misconception is I had a diverse team, so I'm going to have a diversity in the
I'm good.
organization. Everybody will, I'm good. I've done my work. And unfortunately, I have to say, the way how many organizations, they measure the ability to be diverse, unfortunately gets to number. It ended up to be a number game. And when it becomes a number game, you lose exactly the reason why we're doing this, right?
Yep.
How can we create an environment where people can really do that, though? Because, one of the objections that we definitely hear, and I hear all the time about with clients, so people, especially at different level, they say, they hire me for that, for my different experience and etc. But the reality is they're not listening to me. I mean, yes, I'm on the table, but the reality is, whenever I say something, by the way, I'm generalizing, of course, it's not always the case, but say, I'm on the table, I'm sitting on the table and I'm saying my thing, and they value my perspective in theory because they hire me for this reason, but then they keep doing the same thing and they're not really, embracing what I'm saying. I think that there is something that we have to do in order to create that conditions for the diversity to really have an impact, as you just mentioned, right?
Yes, absolutely. And in your example, it's interesting because you're saying, here's a person who's sitting at the table and I'm voicing my opinion, but they're not doing anything with it. In many organizations, the diverse team people are not even sitting at the table. They're just there doing their jobs, and they're not actually in the strategic meetings or,
Yes.
So I think it starts with making sure that you have a group of people that you can talk to, and that part of their job is to be on what I'm going to call a council. Okay. So COUNCIL, a council, and provide the feedback, the questions, the concerns to leadership on an ongoing basis. And the emphasis needs to be ongoing. You can't do it once and go, all right, well, we talked to everybody, we're good.
Right.
And so the best organizations that I've worked at and worked with are those who have a council of some kind. And whether it's ERGs, employee resource groups, where they're saying, okay, we are going to have meetings on an ongoing basis every quarter or even every other month with these particular 6 groups. And we're going to share our insights and stuff and say, what questions do you have? What concerns do you have? What ideas do you have? What do you think about this? And make sure that the lens that you're getting is broad. There are so many effective examples of this in business. Like one of my clients is Toyota, and they always have what they call a dealer council. And what's important about this is Toyota will tell you that they don't sell cars and trucks. They make cars and trucks. Dealers sell cars and trucks. Their dealer body is incredibly important to their success because they don't sell the cars and trucks. They don't sell the product. They make the product. And so what they do a great job of is on an ongoing basis have meetings with dealers of all sizes, because a large metropolitan dealer who sells 400 cars a month is very different than a small rural dealer who sells 80 cars a month. So they want to make sure that they get the perspective of all the dealers and say, what do you think about our advertising campaign? What do you think about our incentive program? What about your salesperson compensation package? All of these things. And the diversity for Toyota might be regional, might be size of dealer, might be the population composition. Is it very Hispanic? Is it very Black? Is it very Asian? Is it very young? Whatever it might be. And this is a model that has proven to be very, very successful, not only for them, but most franchises of any kind do this with their franchisees. And so those listening labs, that's what I'll call it, those listening labs are imperative. And also, they really provide great flags for concerns that the people who are actually doing the work on the ground have. And that's gold.
I love it. I think that is such a great way how you also to structure, inside the organization, this moment, these bodies of people that can actually facilitate that. I love that. Another important topic that is related to the discussion that we're having is all about perceptions. And most of my work is with mindset of people and shifting people perception. Because when they shift people perception, they can see something different, so they can actually act in a different way. To me, that is really the power that we have. if we're able as leaders to create that for our people. So a question I have for you, and I know that is an important topic because you have spoken about how perception shape the way we work many times. So how can really leaders and teams really become much more mindful of this perception to create such stronger relationship? So there is something that we have to do in order to make sure that we don't get stuck with our own perception about people thinking, about people's idea. How can we do that besides, what you just shared in terms of the council?
One of the biggest dangers in business is believing your own perception.
I know.
You think everything's great. Like our customers love us and we're great. And look at how strong our sales are. Look at our good customer loyalty. And you're buying your own advertising, as it were. You're patting yourself on the back and going, we're doing great. I think one of the best ways to understand what real perception is from the outside in. And the way to do that is to talk to your best customers, not your worst. I mean, you should definitely always be listening to your worst customers and their concerns and their complaints because they're going to be very, very vocal. Okay?
Yeah.
It's easy to know what you're doing wrong and try to fix that because your customers who have terrible experiences will let you know what's wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And you should absolutely work on that. But to me, the real opportunity is in working with your best customers who love you and extracting from them what it is they would change about you if they could. And the way to do that is not to say, let me give you the don't before I give you the do. So don't say to your best customer, hey, what don't you like about us? Because your best customers love you. That's why they do business with you. They love you.
Yes.
So if you say, what don't you like about us? They're going to struggle with that question and you're not really going to get a good answer. A better way, the do, is to say, you're one of our best customers. You've been loyal. You know us. You get us. You understand us. What I'd like to know from you is, if you could change one thing about doing business with us, what would it be? Because everybody can offer that. Everybody can say, well, I just wish you had a broader selection, or I wish your hours were better, or I wish that I'm making this up, customer, service line was open 24 hours instead of till 10 p.m. Eastern, or, whatever it might be. And then the other thing is, don't get defensive when they tell you. Because I've been in focus groups with clients, on the side of the one-sided mirror, and the consumers are out there, and the consumers are telling the moderator what they don't like or what they would change. And the client sitting next to me is getting very upset and very defensive. And I'm like, don't get upset. This is what you need to know. This is where it is. And so if you ask your best customers and honor them, tell them again, the reason we wanted to talk to you was because you are one of our best customers and you know us so well. If you could change one thing about us, what would it be? They'll tell you. And then reward them. I mean, honor them in some way and say, thank you for helping us. We really value you. I mean, by doing that, you're almost creating a customer council. But that's a great way that you can see what you can't see.
And how would you apply that internally for your organization, for your people? Meaning, I think it's great to have always the customer, as starting point, because to me, value is what the value that you bring to the customer. So I think it's keeping them in the loop and keep listening, asking questions, about that. I think it's great to see their perception. But how can we do the same, with our own people to understand, what perception are driving them to do something and not doing something else? Is he listening more? Is he being much more curious? It's more about having more conversation. So what is your experience in making sure this perception, come to surface, right?
It comes down to listening. And here's how that works in larger organizations, but it can also work in very small organizations, is the town hall meeting. So I have a client that is, I would say, small to mid-sized. I mean, they're not some big, Fortune 500 company. And one of the things that they do is every Friday afternoon at 2:00, because a lot of people will leave at 4:00, that kind of thing, and just kind of start their weekend. Nobody's really working that hard on a Friday afternoon. Nobody's going to start a project on a Friday afternoon at 1 p.m. So they recognize that, and they realize that that's a time of the week when people are winding down and they're not really ready to leave the office if they're in an office, but they're like hanging out, they're like just socializing and stuff like that. So they decided to use that time that is non-productive work-wise and turn it into productivity. And they have at Friday afternoon town hall meetings, and they provide snacks and they even provide drinks, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic, and just have a very casual town hall where, the leader of the organization is saying, hey, I just want to give you the updates on, what happened this week. And this is what's going on. And we're still working on it. Or, hey, we have something to celebrate. I just want to make an announcement about that. And then they take questions from all of those employees. And the questions are all over the place. Bing, 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 like no one topic. That on an ongoing basis is the greatest thing in the world because number one, it really shows that management on an ongoing basis cares about what employees are concerned about or wondering about. And it also really, really does a great job of eliminating office gossip because people know what's going on. Where gossip, which is very corrosive, where gossip comes into play is when there's a void in information, right? People start going, did you hear? And it's completely false, and in a vacuum, people will just fill that vacuum with whatever they're concerned about.
People perception and whatever they understood, whether it's right or not, doesn't matter.
Correct.
That's what
whatever
they
think they heard or whatever. Yeah. And so that I think is a great way, and it costs nothing. This particular organization has like 50 employees, very manageable. So providing some chips and dip, some guacamole and chips and some, wings or something on a Friday afternoon is a small investment for the solidarity that they're getting, the inclusion that they're getting. And employees will bring up with Q&A the things that not only they want to know, but the things that they are worried about. What's that worth to a CEO?
Oh, yeah.
It's priceless.
It's priceless. And I love the fact of how you're using this town hall, with meaning, meaningful rather than using it to broadcasting and then leaving rather than creating opportunity to have a proper conversation. I love it. I think it's a great idea. And, maybe weekly basis in a large organization, maybe it could be a little bit difficult, but you can create, in your own function, in your department. So I think it's more an intention than anything else. I think it can be definitely created. I'm sure that people maybe in the audience, they might think something like, that's great when you have a culture where everybody feel they can contribute. And the other people, might not leave that situation right now because they might feel like it's not easy or possible to speak up in an organization because, feeling, the fear of repercussions, or consequences, intimidated in a way or another. It's very subtle, it's not like it's written in stones or written, on the wall. How do you deal, or at least in your experience, how can you really surface that diversity of thinking, of ideas, etc., when there are conditions in the workplace where it's not that easy to do that? And you think the CEO should have, something needs to be created, right, to make sure that people can feel safe to speak.
What I would do is in any group of people, so let's say you've got a team of people, whether it's 5,000 employees or, 30 or 10, I would work with the leaders. And there's always leaders. There's always that person who has the opinion that other people listen to. They might not have a leadership role, but they're influential, right? They just, they're the people who everybody talks to and everybody listens to. If I were trying to foster an environment where people in those town hall meetings feel free to actually ask the questions that are on their minds or express their concerns, then I would start by working with those opinion leaders behind the scenes and say, okay, we're going to have a meeting on Friday. We're going to have a town hall meeting. And what I want you to do is I want you to kick it off by asking the question that you've heard in the hallway or that you know of, and setting the stage for asking that so that I can respond. If I'm the CEO, I can respond to that. And people realize it's not a scary situation to ask those questions, and that the respect and the courtesy in that room is felt by everyone because that person is leading and saying, hey, I've got a question. We heard there's going to be layoffs in December and, everybody is worried about their job. Is that really true? And if so, how many people are you going to lay off? I mean, put it out there because that's what the conversation is anyway. When the CEO is not in the room, that's what the conversation is get that stuff on the table and make it very, very clear and visible to people that no one got in trouble for doing that. And if I was a CEO and I got a question like that, I would say, Thank you so much for bringing that up. I want to crystallize and clarify that right now. That is 100% false. We are not doing, that's an opportunity to not only set the record straight or tell the truth about the situation, but also to thank the person who brought it up. And if you do that on an ongoing basis, people will understand that no one's going to get in trouble. And it's going to take a little time for people to realize that that is normal, that that's accepted and that it's okay. But someone's got to start. And usually those opinion leaders that you have within teams are a little more confident about speaking up than people who are a little more shy. And you need those confident people to be the ones who kick it off. No one wants to be the one that is the first to go, the first person to raise their hand. Nobody wants that. So if you enlist those leaders in advance and say, look, we want to get a constructive Q&A session going on Friday. I need your help. I need you to ask a couple of questions to get the conversation going. It happens in any organization and in any group. I mean, even when I'm doing Q&A with a professional speaking engagement and there's 200 people in the room, there's always that one person who's like, I've got a question, and once that person does that, everybody else feels free to participate as well because they realize it's not scary. You just need someone to kick it off.
No, I agree. I think that's a very practical and good suggestion in identifying those people. They are they are considered key influencers, and let them, break the ice and start a conversation. However, without a clear, explicit request from the CEO to create at least a condition for people to feel safe. And if make it clear, people will still be reluctant to share. So I think it goes together. So
there's one more thing on that too, which is a CEO, has a good one, has their ear to the ground all the time. And they might hear from their leadership team. They might hear from their top people, happens. Hey, this is what people were hearing.
Yes.
It's perfectly okay for the leader of an organization to kick off that town hall meeting, even before you take Q&A from the attendees, to say, here's something I've been hearing about, and I want to set the record straight. I want to talk about this first because I've been hearing about this. All of a sudden, everybody will exhale in that room and go, oh, yeah, okay, they know about this. Yeah, and they're going to give us the truth now, And so it positions that leader as someone who really does listen and has their ear to the ground and is also willing to address what they've heard and either confirm it or set the record straight if what they've heard is not accurate, and say, let me just tell you what I've been hearing lately. I've been hearing a lot from, people about this particular topic. Let's tackle that right now first. And people are like, oh, okay. Wow. They really do have their hand on the rudder of the ship and they know what's going on.
Yes. There's a fantastic quote from one of my clients. He says, as a leader, never walk past the trash. Meaning if you say something like politics or gossip, etc., don't just work, without considering, tackle it, deal with that. And I think that's exactly what you are suggesting, which I totally endorse. Great. So there is an element of mindset, which I think is critical for creating what we just discussed today. We mentioned about asking questions, being in a listening mode, be curious about, what people think. And it's really about curiosity. So curiosity is an element, is a mindset, is an attitude, is a mindset trait that is required in order to allow all this diversity of thoughts, surface. What we can really do, besides the structure, right? How can we create conversations or what we need to do, what needs to be true in organizations to really develop curiosity as a thing rather than just leaving to individuals to try to manage that? Is this something that leaders should consider to really drive curiosity across the entire organization?
5 words. Tell me more about that. So a lot of times what happens in any organization is when someone has an idea, like let's just say that you give me an idea. we're talking. And we're just informally, we're talking.
Right.
And you've got an idea or you bring it up in a meeting or whatever, and everybody pounces on you and goes, well, that's never going to work. And here's why. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the budget. And it's really easy to shoot ideas down, especially if on the surface, they really are seemingly improbable, okay, or flawed. But the best curiosity conversations come from, instead of shutting that down because it won't work, in reality, it really might not work. However, while the idea might be flawed, the thinking behind it might be gold. And so by saying, hey, tell me more about that. I haven't said anything about your idea. I haven't said it's good or bad. I haven't proclaimed anything. I just want to know more. And you can say, tell me more about that, or how did you come up with that? Once again, we're trying to get to the thinking or the issue behind the actual idea. That is curiosity that yields results. Because if you can get to that thinking and somebody says, well, I was actually working on this the other day and then I ran into a problem. And I started thinking that the answer to the problem is blah, 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 blah. And let's just say the answer that they came up with is really not very likely to happen or be feasible. But if I'm leaning into that and going, okay, what was the problem again? What started this? Tell me more about that. How did you come up with that? That is going to lead to actual answers and ideation on solutions that are feasible, not just shooting down an opinion or a thought. So 5 words, tell me more about that. Or how did you come up with that?
Yeah, it's that easy, and it's so simple. It's so simple, and I believe that is really misunderstood because it's not kind of a question, and normally in organizations people ask to each other because they're much more, probably as you say, too much biased or at least oriented, by the solution rather than what is the thinking process, right?
Or the direction, right? Like if you bring me an idea, my direction meter is going to go, ooh, good idea, or that's not going to work. And so it's like very polarized. And I feel like there's this huge opportunity in the gray area in the middle to go, tell me more about that. The other benefit of leaning into tell me more about that, or how did you come up with that, is people feel respected and listened to. Because if I'm saying, I value you, tell me how you came up with that. I like what you're saying. I don't know if it's going to work, but tell me more. People feel like, wow, they're really listening to me because you are. And then that fosters trust and inclusion and open communication. Like there's nothing bad that happens from that question.
Agreed. And I suppose that will be the best vehicle to start driving innovation and maybe better decision making, because you can really have an open, transparent, and respectful and constructive conversation about a challenge rather than creating, a polarized version about A or B or me or you and all that, right?
In fact, one of my clients is a global tech company. Okay, they've got like 20,000 employees all across the world, and they have some of the best and brightest minds in the world working on their products, which are global. And one of the things that they shared with me is, despite this brain power that they have, that collaboration was lacking. Because what happens when really, really, really smart people work together and they have incredible vision and ideas and they're the true innovators who change the world is they don't want anybody to steal their idea. Yeah. So when they think about collaboration, they think about that as a threat. If I tell you about my idea, you're going to take it and you're going to get credit for it. And I'm the one who created it, right? So they wanted to bring me in to help work with them on collaboration and how they could get their incredibly brilliant people to work together, because it makes even more brilliance. And what we landed on was this whole idea of tell me more about that. And, I want to hear more about that. How did you come up with that? Because they were all so smart. If smart person A said to smart person B, I've got this great idea, smart person B wants to look even smarter by going, well, that's not going to work, and here's why. And the result was always negative. It was never positive. It was always, that's not going to work. In other words, I don't want to admit that you actually came up with that idea, and I don't want to give you the halo that goes with that. So we had to get past all that. And the idea of tell me more about that. how did you come up with that, came from them, not me. I mean, I was leading, a roundtable
designing,
discussion.
orchestrating that.
Yeah, it was very organic. It was a laboratory kind of thing or whatever. But that's what they said would work, is because then it's not about whose idea was it. It was actually fostering that collaboration. If they said, tell me more about that, and the other person said something, then they're having a dialogue as opposed to, that's not going to work. Boom, we're done. And it was incredibly effective.
I'm sure it is. And I think it's, again, I'm struck by how simple it could be, as long as the level
cost anything. This stuff doesn't cost a dime.
Yes. And provided that, you have the level of curiosity and you're also willing to listen. And again, also listening from my experience, and I'm sure Kelly is similar to your experience. There are different ways of how you listen to people. So one way is listening just to respond, and listening, sometimes in a nasty way or just to validate your own ideas and concept. And there is another listening, which is much more intentional. It's a listening that is much more generous. And that's where something can be created. So that condition of listening meaningfully is critical, because otherwise, even if you ask a right question, but you're not ready then for listening, you're not going to get the effect that you want, right?
And I would add to that, I agree with everything that you said. And I would add to that the best CEOs that I know of leading the most successful companies personally are very humble, very humble.
They are.
They have great jobs, and obviously they're incredibly smart, and that's how they got those jobs. And they're very experienced, and they're very, very strategic and very good. But when they listen, what that communicates to the person that they're listening to is respect, and it fosters trust. If someone is actually really listening, not saying much, just listening, and you're talking and talking, I could trust that person, because they're not in position to go, yeah, but, or, like you say, listening just to respond. And that creates that trust, then creates loyalty. I mean, this is like a really positive loop cycle, just listening, means that you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on, but it also fosters respect. It fosters inclusion. It fosters listening. And then, that fosters trust. And then that fosters teamwork. It just, nothing bad happens there.
No, it's a domino effect. It's really a domino effect. So I love that. Okay, Kelly, last question I have for you is, we discussed so many practical and I love that, practical, pragmatic way to spark conversations, to have the right level of curiosity, to a number of things that we discussed there. They're very easy to be, to implement. The last part is more about the culture, the organizational culture, because these things will happen potentially in silos, so in teams and between individuals. But how can we bring in, to the entire organization as the new way of how we work together? Because these are new behaviors, right? These are new habits that need to be created, where people start listening more. They need to be much more curious. They have a number of ways to have conversations. You mentioned a great example about how to foster collaboration. But how can we bring in this to an entire organization, especially for organizations that are scaling, growing, and they are at least in the mid-market size? So, they are potentially, big. How can we bring into much more, at an organizational level? So any tips, any advice, rather than, just to give you the other extreme is, let's, write amazing policies about how much we need to be diverse, etc., which is not really where we are going here.
The number one piece of advice I can give you is start by starting. Nobody knows how to do this until they just start. And then what happens is they start by doing something like a town hall meeting or listening labs or ERGs, etc. And then usually what happens is the feedback that they get from that, or the structure itself, they find out, well, you know what, that was good, but it was kind of clunky. It was hard. There's got to be a better way. And continuing on that journey, but making the modifications that are necessary along the way. I can't tell you how many executives I've talked to who said, yeah, we did a listening lab one time, or, we did a town hall, or we started off by having different groups of conversations and we scheduled an hour. And at 50 minutes, we were actually just getting somewhere. And then we had to stop. So that's just a little thing, but it's a huge insight, which is if you're going to have a conversation and a really in-depth one and somewhere that one that really has no beginning, middle, or end, it's going to go and become the shape that it's going to become. Allow opportunity for that. And that's what I liked about these town hall meetings that this mid-size organization did, is that they did it at, 2:00 in the afternoon on a Friday. And if somebody had to leave at 3, they left at 3. But other people stayed until 5 because they had so many questions, or they were just enjoying the opportunity to listen to executives and to socialize with each other. But just start by starting and try not to put those stringent parameters on it that will limit the result and the outcome that you're going to get. But you have to start with something. And maybe if you don't know how to start, we've talked about some great, ideas here, but talk to your people and say, if we want to have an ongoing dialogue with the teams, what do you think is the best way to do that? Do we have a company outing on an afternoon and we all go on a picnic somewhere? It could be anything, but you don't know, and you don't have to come up with all the solutions. Let your people come up with those solutions too. But again, trying to cram a strategic conversation into 48 minutes might not be very fruitful.
No, definitely not, because I truly believe that leadership is in the conversations, always sits in conversations. So whatever you want to create, magic, performance, incredible results, there is no other way to do it through, if not, by having great conversation with people. So you need to allow the time to have these conversations. Right. Yeah, and it can't be only either transactional or strategic. So you need to spend time in having the right conversation where real things happen. So I love that. And I think the other observation I have based on what you said is you didn't use these terms, but that's, what I'm picking up from what you said, which again is consistent with my experience in culture. Culture really develops on its own. So you have just to create the conditions to allow that to happen, because it's like kind of a virality. So when that starts and things to change at the micro level, then become a macro level, you just need to allow that to happen. And that's where really culture really changes, isn't it?
It is. And this is an analogy, but I think it's kind of like throwing a dinner party. If you throw a dinner party and you've got 8 people over for dinner, when they first arrive, nobody knows what to talk about, right? They're just kind of standing around. They're like, how are you? I'm good. How's your holidays? It's really superficial. There's no substance there until they actually relax and start talking. And then by the time you're sitting down at a table and you're having a meal together, the conversation is fantastic. And by the end of the evening, the chemistry is completely different than when it started. It's no different in any group of people. So allow for that chemistry to, I believe you used the word evolve, allow for that time for it to evolve, and it won't happen in 10 minutes. It just won't.
Yes. And I think that is a fantastic mechanism that is, by the way, self-generated, is organic, to allow people to finally share really what are their thinking.
And get comfortable.
Yes, exactly right. So I love that. I think it was great suggestion. And again, I love it because it's a consistent way of shaping culture that is not dictated by the top and say, you have to do this right now. It's more about allowing people to create something like that. But you have to create the conditions as a leader. Kelly, that was amazing. So I'm conscious about that we are getting to the end of this conversation. So what is maybe the last thought that, you want to share with the audience, that maybe something that I didn't ask, or something that you think we missed, or something that is still meaningful to share as a final message to the leaders that are listening to the episode today?
People are people. We all care about the same things. We all want good jobs, good community, good schools, nice people to work alongside of. People are people. Don't be afraid of our differences. We're all in this together. And if you just lean into the differences and say, I want to know what you think about this, or what do you think we should look out for? What are your concerns? Just be open to that and have those conversations on an ongoing basis. And you will find that there's far more that unites us than divides us. And people are people.
What a great way to finish this episode, with this Wonderful message. Kelly, thank you so much for being on the show. Where people should go if they want to know more about you and your work?
Sure. My website is www.mcdonaldmarketing.com, and it's just McDonald marketing.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and you can follow me at Kelly C. McDonald, like C as in cat. That's my middle initial since there's 20 billion Kelly McDonalds out there. And so Kelly C. McDonald. It's a really common Irish name. So that's where I can be found. And I'm on all the socials, and I would love to engage with your listeners and your viewers.
Fantastic, Kelly. And we will put, these links into the show notes so people can have easy access to it. Kelly, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation.